I was 68 when my world shattered. My name is Matilda, and for as long as I can remember, my life revolved around family. The house, a two-story colonial with ivy curling up its brick walls, was more than just a home. It was my legacy, built on years of sweat and sacrifice. After my husband, Tom, died 20 years ago, I worked 2 jobs, days at a school cafeteria, nights at a grocery store, to keep it standing. Every mortgage payment, every repaired shingle, was for my daughter, Clara, so she'd always have a place to call hers. But that night, as we sat around the oak dining table I'd refinished by hand, her words hit me like a blow. "You still think you matter here?" It wasn't supposed to end like this. Clara, now 35, had moved back home 3 years ago with her husband, Derek. They'd hit hard times, layoffs, credit card debt, and I opened my doors without hesitation. Family helps family, I told myself. I cooked their dinners, washed their dishes, paid the utilities, even covered the property taxes while they got back on their feet. I didn't mind at first. Clara's laughter used to fill the house, her hugs a reminder of the little girl who'd cling to me during thunderstorms. But lately, something had shifted. Whispers behind closed doors, eye rolls when I spoke, a chill in the air I couldn't ignore. That night, it all came to a head. We were eating pot roast, the kind I'd made for years, the recipe my mother passed down. The table was set with the good plates, the ones Tom and I bought for our first anniversary. I'd spent hours in the kitchen, hoping a family meal might bridge the growing distance. Clara picked at her food, scrolling her phone. Derek slouched, sipping wine I'd bought. The silence was heavy, so I cleared my throat. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "maybe it's time you two started contributing to the bills." The electric's gone up, and Clara's laugh stopped me cold. It wasn't warm or kind, it was sharp, mocking, like glass shattering. "Contribute," she said, setting her phone down. "Mom, this is our house now. You're just here." Derek smirked, his eyes flicking to her, then back to his glass. The words hung in the air, each one a fresh wound. My fork trembled in my hand. I stared at the table, its scratches and stains a map of our life, Clara's crayon marks from kindergarten, the dent from Tom's hammer during a late-night repair. This was my house, paid for with my grief, my labor, my love. And she'd reduced me to nothing. My chest tightened, heartbreak flooding in. I'd raised Clara to respect, to value family. I'd stayed up nights sewing her prom dress, driven her to college, cried with her through breakups. When she married Derek, I welcomed him, even when his charm felt too polished, his promises too thin. I'd given them everything, and now they sat across from me, smug, as if I were a tenant in my own life. "Clara," I said, my voice low, "this house isn't yours. I'm still paying the mortgage." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, please," she said. "You've been milking that story for years. Dad left you enough, didn't he? It's practically paid off." Derek leaned back, crossing his arms, his silence louder than any words. They didn't know, had never asked, how much I'd struggled to keep the house after Tom's death. The life insurance barely covered his medical bills. Every payment came from me, from overtime shifts and skipped vacations. I could have told them, but their faces told me it wouldn't matter. To them, I was a relic, a nuisance in their space. I excused myself, my legs unsteady as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. The door clicked shut, and I sank onto the bed, the quilt my mother made soft against my palms. The room was a museum of my life, photos of Clara's graduations, Tom's old watch on the dresser, a watercolor I'd painted in a class I took after his death. Each item anchored me, but tonight, they felt like weights, tying me to a family that no longer saw me. Betrayal burned, hot and raw, but beneath it, a spark of defiance flickered. I wasn't just here. I was Matilda, widow, mother, survivor. I'd faced worse than this and come out stronger. I couldn't sleep. Clara's laugh echoed, her words carving deeper each time. The house creaked, its familiar sounds now foreign, as if it, too, had turned against me. Around 2 a.m., I pulled out my laptop, my hands trembling but purposeful. I emailed Susan, my lawyer, a friend who'd helped settle Tom's estate. "I need to talk about the house," I typed. "Urgent. Can we meet tomorrow?" I hit send, my heart pounding. I didn't know the details yet, but I knew one thing, I wasn't done. They'd mocked me, diminished me, but I wasn't powerless. By morning, the spark of defiance had grown into a plan, not out of spite, but to reclaim my worth. I'd remind them who I was, not with words, but with actions they'd never see coming. "Real quick, tell me where you're tuning in from, and what time is it there? I actually read every single comment, so don't be shy. If this story speaks to you, hit that like and subscribe. It shows me you're listening." Let's continue to the story. The morning after Clara's cruel words, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My eyes were puffy from crying, but my heart was steady, fueled by that spark of defiance that had ignited in the dark. I wasn't going to beg for respect in my own home. I was Matilda, and I'd survived harder battles than this. As the coffee brewed, filling my kitchen with its familiar scent, I moved through the house like nothing had changed. I smiled at Clara as she grabbed her keys, rushing out for work. I nodded at Derek's half-hearted grunt from the couch, where he scrolled his phone, oblivious to the storm he'd helped unleash. Inside, I was already untangling myself from their world. Susan, my lawyer, had replied to my late-night email with a single line, "Meet me at 10, Cafe on Maple." I dressed carefully, my favorite navy cardigan, a scarf Tom had given me years ago, small armors against the ache in my chest. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, its wooden tables warmed by sunlight. Susan sat in the corner, her gray bob neat, her eyes sharp with understanding as I slid into the booth. "Tell me everything," she said, her pen poised over a legal pad. I recounted the dinner, Clara's laugh, Derek's smirk, the way they'd reduced me to a ghost in my own house. My voice cracked once, but I kept going. "They think they own the place," I finished, my hands wrapped around my mug. "I want out of the title, Susan. Let them have it." She raised an eyebrow, her pen pausing. "You're sure? That house is your life's work?" I nodded, my jaw tight. "I'm sure. I can't stay where I'm not wanted." Susan leaned back, studying me. She'd known me through Tom's illness, the lean years after, the pride I took in keeping the house. But she didn't argue. Instead, she explained the logistics, her voice calm and precise. The house had a mortgage, $120,000 left, a fact I'd never shared with Clara or Derek. They assumed it was nearly paid off, a gift from Tom's foresight, because I'd never corrected their ignorance. I'd been paying it quietly, month after month, shielding them from the truth. If I transferred the title to them, the mortgage would become their responsibility. The bank wouldn't care who signed the deed, they'd expect payments, or they'd foreclose. "You'd walk away free," Susan said, "but they'd face the debt. And if they can't pay..." She trailed off, but I understood. Clara and Derek's jobs, her as a marketing assistant, him as a freelance graphic designer, barely covered their car loans and credit cards. They'd been living rent-free, relying on my generosity. The mortgage would crush them. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. This wasn't revenge, it was justice, a chance for them to learn what owning a house really meant. "Do it," I said. Susan nodded, promising to draft the paperwork by the end of the week. That afternoon, I started planning my escape. I couldn't stay in the house, surrounded by memories now tainted by Clara's words. I searched online and found a one-bedroom apartment across town, a cozy place with a balcony overlooking a park. The rent was manageable with my pension and savings, and the idea of a fresh start stirred something in me, hope, maybe, or the thrill of reclaiming my life. I called the landlord, arranged a viewing, and by evening, I'd put down a deposit. It felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's story, but it also felt right. Over the next few days, I worked in secret. While Clara and Derek were out, I packed my essentials. I started with the photo albums, their leather covers soft under my fingers, filled with images of Clara's childhood, Tom's grin, our old dog Rusty. I took Tom's watch from the dresser, its ticking a quiet comfort. I folded my mother's quilt, its patchwork faded but warm. Each item was a piece of me, not the house, and I was taking myself back. I moved methodically, filling boxes I stored in the garage, out of sight. Clara and Derek didn't notice, they were too busy planning a renovation, tossing around words like open concept and modernize, as if my home were a blank slate. Their chatter grated, but I kept my face neutral, my plan hidden. By the end of the week, Susan called. The paperwork was ready. I met her at her office, a small room lined with law books and framed diplomas. The deed transfer lay on her desk, my name bold on the title. I signed it over to Clara and Derek, my hand steady despite the pang in my heart. "It's done," Susan said, sliding the documents into an envelope. "The bank will notify them of the mortgage soon." I thanked her, my voice quiet but firm. That night, I hired a mover for the weekend, when Clara and Derek would be at a friend's barbecue. I'd be gone before they returned. On moving day, I walked through the house one last time. The living room, where Clara learned to walk. The kitchen, where Tom and I danced to the radio. The backyard, where I'd planted roses after his death. I loved this place, but it wasn't mine anymore, not because of the title, but because of the betrayal. I closed the door, my boxes loaded into the mover's van, and drove to my new apartment. The balcony greeted me with a breeze, the park below alive with joggers and dog walkers. I set Tom's watch on the counter, hung my quilt over the couch, and felt a weight lift. I was free. The spark of defiance was now aflame, and I waited, knowing the bank's letter would arrive soon. Let them laugh when they saw the numbers. 3 weeks after I moved into my apartment, my phone lit up with Clara's name. I was sitting on my balcony, sipping chamomile tea, the park below buzzing with kids on bikes and couples strolling under the oaks. The call came at dusk, the sky streaked with pink, and I let it ring, watching the screen until it went to voicemail. Clara's voice burst through, high and frantic. Mom, what the hell? We got an eviction notice. The bank says we owe $120,000. Where are you? Her words were sharp, edged with panic, but I heard no remorse, no trace of the daughter who once curled up beside me during storms. I set the phone down, my hand steady, and took another sip of tea. Let them panic. They'd earned it. I'd known this moment was coming. Susan had warned me the bank wouldn't waste time. The mortgage, now in Clara and Derek's names, demanded payments they didn't know existed. I'd carried that burden for years, juggling bills and side hustles, never letting them see the strain. They'd assumed the house was a gift, a free ride, while I was just the old woman in the background, cooking their meals and paying their way. Clara's laugh, "You still think you matter here?" Still stung, but it no longer controlled me. I was in my own space now, a one-bedroom haven with my quilt on the couch and Tom's watch ticking softly on the counter. I was free, and they were about to learn what owning a house really meant. Derek called next, his voice tight with anger. "Matilda, this isn't funny. You can't just disappear and leave us with this mess." I almost laughed at the irony. Mess? I'd spent decades cleaning up messes, Tom's medical bills, Clara's college tuition, their endless, temporary crises. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, the same way I'd felt the weight of their betrayal. Susan had told me the bank would give them 30 days to make a payment or face foreclosure. Clara and Derek's jobs, her marketing gig, his sporadic design work, couldn't handle a $1,200 monthly mortgage on top of their debts. I didn't wish them ruin, but I wasn't their safety net anymore. The next day, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, this time Clara, her voice softer but still desperate. "Mom, please. We didn't know about the mortgage. Why didn't you tell us? Where are you?" I played it twice, searching for a hint of apology, but found none. It was all panic, all self-preservation. I waited a few hours, then called her back, keeping my tone calm, almost distant. "You said it was your house, Clara," I said. "I figured you had it handled." Silence stretched on the line, thick and heavy. "You can't do this to us," she finally said, her voice cracking. I smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, but because the power had shifted. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You wanted to matter. Now you do." I hung up before she could argue. 2 days later, they showed up at my apartment. I'd given Clara the address weeks ago, when I texted her I'd moved out, but this was the first time they'd come. The knock was sharp, impatient. I opened the door to find Clara, eyes red from crying. And Derek, his jaw tight, arms crossed like he was ready for a fight. "Can we come in?" Clara asked, her voice small. I stepped aside, gesturing to my modest living room, my quilt on the couch, a vase of daisies on the coffee table, a bookshelf half filled with novels I'd finally had time to read. "Nice place," Derek muttered, but his tone was sour, like he resented my peace. "You tricked us," he said, not sitting down. "You knew about the mortgage and didn't say anything." I raised an eyebrow, settling into my armchair. "I paid it for years," I said. "You never asked how. You assumed it was yours, so I gave it to you." Clara fidgeted, twisting her wedding ring. "Mom, we can't afford this," she said. "The bank's going to take the house." Her eyes searched mine, pleading, but I saw no acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused, no regret for her words. "You said I didn't matter," I said quietly. "You wanted the house. It's yours, mortgage and all." Derek paced, his sneakers scuffing my rug. "This is spiteful, Matilda. You're punishing us." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Punishing you? I gave you a home, rent-free, for 3 years. I cooked, cleaned, paid the bills. And you laughed in my face." Clara flinched, but Derek just glared. "We didn't mean it like that," she mumbled, barely audible. "It wasn't enough, not yet." I stood, gesturing to the door. "You've got 30 days to figure it out," I said. "The bank's number is on the notice. Good luck." They left, Clara's shoulders slumped, Derek muttering under his breath. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. Part of me ached. Clara was still my daughter, her baby pictures still tucked in my albums. But another part, the part that had carried me through Tom's death and years of sacrifice, stood firm. I'd given them everything, but I wouldn't give them my dignity. I walked to the balcony, the evening air cool against my skin. The park lights twinkled below, and I felt a quiet strength. They were panicking, but I was calm. The house wasn't my burden anymore, and neither were they. The days after Clara and Derek's visit to my apartment were quiet, but I knew the storm was still brewing. I'd hear from them again. Panic has a way of clinging like damp air before a rain. I didn't gloat, didn't dwell on their distress. Instead, I leaned into my new life. My apartment, small as it was, felt like a sanctuary. The balcony became my morning ritual, where I'd sip coffee and watch the park wake up, joggers weaving through paths, dogs chasing frisbees, the world moving without needing me to hold it together. At 68, I was learning to live for myself, and it felt like sunlight after years in the shade. Through mutual friends, I heard whispers of Clara and Derek's scramble. They'd tried negotiating with the bank, but their credit was a mess: missed car payments, maxed out cards, no savings to lean on. The $120,000 mortgage was a mountain they couldn't climb. They'd started selling things: Derek's fancy TV, Clara's designer bags, even the dining table I'd left behind, its scratches and memories now someone else's bargain. Part of me ached. Clara was my daughter, and I'd raised her to be stronger than this. But another part, the part that remembered her laugh, her dismissal, felt resolute. I'd carried their weight too long. They needed to learn, not just for me, but for themselves. Clara called every few days, her tone shifting from anger to desperation. "Mom, we're drowning," she said in one voicemail, her voice raw. "The bank's talking foreclosure. We could lose everything." I listened, my thumb hovering over the delete button, but I didn't call back right away. I wasn't heartless. I loved her, always would, but love didn't mean erasing consequences. She hadn't apologized, hadn't acknowledged the wound she'd carved with her words. I wanted her to face the truth. Respect wasn't optional, not even for family. Meanwhile, I built a rhythm in my new life. I joined a painting class at the community center, my fingers relearning the brushstrokes I'd loved before life got too heavy. I met a neighbor, Lila, a retired nurse with a quick laugh, and we started sharing coffee and stories. My apartment filled with small joys: a new bookshelf for my novels, a pot of lavender on the balcony, a radio playing jazz in the evenings. I wasn't rich, but my pension and savings were enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't pouring myself into someone else's needs. The defiance that had sparked after Clara's betrayal was now a quiet strength, steady as the ticking of Tom's watch on my counter. A month after the eviction notice, Clara called again, her voice different, less frantic, more subdued. "Can we talk, Mom? In person?" I paused, stirring my tea, the steam curling in the morning light. "Come to dinner," I said. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m. I didn't offer to go to them, to the house I'd built. If they wanted my help, they'd come to my terms, my space. They agreed, and I spent the next day preparing, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to set the tone. I cooked a simple meal: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from the farmer's market. My small table was set with care, a single candle flickering in the center. They arrived on time, a small victory. Clara looked worn, her hair pulled back messily, her eyes shadowed. Derek's usual swagger was gone, replaced by a tense jaw and fidgeting hands. They sat, the air thick with unspoken words. "This is nice," Clara said, glancing around my apartment, her voice almost shy. Derek nodded, but his eyes darted to the door, like he was already planning his escape. I served the food, letting the silence settle. Finally, Clara spoke. "We're trying, Mom. We got second jobs, me at a coffee shop, Derek doing delivery. But the bank's not budging." I nodded, cutting my chicken. "And?" I said, keeping my voice even. Derek leaned forward, his tone sharp. "We need help, Matilda. You can't just leave us like this." I set my fork down, meeting his eyes. "I didn't leave you. You pushed me out. You laughed when I asked for respect." Clara flinched, her fork pausing midair. "We didn't mean it," she mumbled, staring at her plate. It was the closest she'd come to an apology, but it wasn't enough, not yet. I leaned back, folding my hands. "I'll help," I said, and their shoulders relaxed, too quickly. "But not for free." I laid out my terms: a real apology, not just words but a commitment to change. Family counseling, to rebuild what they'd broken. And a financial plan: they'd take a budgeting course, prove they could handle the mortgage. "I'll pay 1 month," I said. "That buys you time. But you sign a contract, or I'm done." Derek's jaw tightened, but Clara nodded, her eyes glistening. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll do it." They left after dinner, the contract in Clara's hand, drafted by Susan that morning. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt steady. I'd drawn a line, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. They'd hurt me, but I wasn't closing the door entirely. I wanted Clara to grow, to remember the values I'd raised her with. As I cleaned the dishes, the candle still burning, I felt the weight of my choice. I'd given them a chance, but I wasn't their savior. I was Matilda, and I was enough. 5 months after I walked away from the house, I sat on my balcony, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. The park below was alive with spring, tulips bursting in red and yellow, kids flying kites, the air sweet with new grass. At 69, I'd found a peace I hadn't known since Tom was alive. Clara's words, "You still think you matter here?" still echoed sometimes, but they no longer cut. They'd been a wound, yes, but also a wake-up call. I'd spent decades pouring myself into others, believing it was my duty. Now, I was learning to pour into myself, and it felt like coming home. Clara and Derek had managed to keep the house, but just barely. The contract I'd given them, the one requiring counseling, a budgeting course, and a real apology, had been a lifeline they grudgingly accepted. I'd paid 1 month's mortgage, $1,200, to give them breathing room, but that was it. They'd taken second jobs, cut their spending, and started meeting with a financial advisor. I heard through a friend they'd stopped eating out, sold Derek's prized gaming console, even rented out the guest room to a coworker. It wasn't easy for them, and I didn't pretend it was. But I didn't step in to fix it, either. They were adults, and the house, their house, as they'd claimed, was their responsibility now. Clara started visiting me, usually alone. The first time, she showed up with a potted plant, a clumsy olive branch. "Thought it'd look nice on your balcony," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. I thanked her, setting the fern beside my lavender. Over tea, she talked about her job at the coffee shop, how she was learning to manage money, how counseling was harder than she'd expected. "Derek hates it," she admitted, twisting her mug. "But I'm starting to get it. We messed up, Mom." It wasn't a full apology, but it was closer than before. I listened, nodded, didn't rush to absolve her. Trust, like respect, would take time. One evening, she said something that stopped me cold. "I didn't realize how much you did," she whispered, staring at the park. "The house, the bills, all of it. I thought it was easy." I set my tea down, my throat tight. "It wasn't," I said simply. "But I did it because I loved you." Her eyes welled up, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the girl who'd once clung to me, who'd trusted me to make the world right. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Keep going," I said. "You're not done yet." Derek was slower to come around. He showed up once, stiff and awkward, muttering about how they were trying. I didn't push him. His pride was bruised, and I wasn't here to soothe it. Counseling was chipping away at his defensiveness, Clara told me, but change was a slog. I didn't need him to like me, I needed him to respect me, and that was still a work in progress. I kept my boundaries firm, my apartment a space where I called the shots. Clara's visits became a small bridge, not fully rebuilt but sturdy enough to walk on. My life, meanwhile, bloomed. My painting class turned into a passion, my canvases, bright with blues and golds, lined my apartment walls. Lila, my neighbor, became a friend, joining me for walks and book club meetings at the library. I bought a new chair for the balcony, a cushioned one where I'd read or watch the sunset, Tom's watch ticking nearby like a heartbeat. I wasn't lonely, though I'd expected to be. I was whole, maybe for the first time since Tom died. The house, with its ivy and memories, was a chapter I'd closed. I didn't miss it, not the way I'd thought I would. Looking back, that night at the dining table could have broken me. Clara's laugh, Derek's smirk, the betrayal of being dismissed in my own home, it was a knife to the heart. But instead of crumbling, I'd chosen myself. Transferring the title, moving out, letting them face the eviction notice, it wasn't revenge, not really. It was a reckoning, for them and for me. They'd learned what owning meant, and I'd learned what I was worth. I wasn't just here, as Clara had sneered. I was Matilda, mother, survivor, a woman who'd built a life, lost it, and built another. As I write this, I'm watching a kite soar over the park, its colors vivid against the April sky. My tea is warm, my apartment quiet, my heart full. Clara's coming over tomorrow, she's bringing cookies, she says, a recipe we used to make together. I'll open the door, but I won't carry her burdens anymore. I'll love her, guide her, but I won't lose myself again. I matter, always have, and no one, not even my own daughter, can take that away. This is my new beginning, and it's enough.